here with us today. Lord, thank you that you fill us with yourself. Lord, you fill us with a desire to be with you, to commune with you. Lord, I just ask at this time to glorify you, Lord. I thank you that you rescued us, and not only did you do that, Lord, but you bestowed upon us gifts that we can better serve you. Lord, I just ask that you teach us about those gifts here today, Lord, that we might leave here better servants. We might leave here more equipped to serve you and those around us. In your name I pray. Amen.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning. Good morning.
So, as was introduced, this week the theme is superheroes, and the reason the theme is superheroes is because we're focusing on spiritual gifts. So Chuck said, "All right, Steve, I want you to preach, and you got to pick a superhero for the topic," which is a surprisingly hard thing to do. So after some extensive research on the subject, I picked this week's superhero, which is going to be Green Lantern, which is good because there's a Green Lantern thing right there. So at least I picked wisely. And I'm not going to tell you why I picked Green Lantern just yet, so I want you to think about it. This is going to be like a little bit of the interactive part, where you're going to try to figure out why I picked Green Lantern. Now, Green Lantern, I'll explain just a little bit about him so you can give you some clues. So Green Lantern, his power is that he has this, well, it's not really his power, he has this ring, and this ring lets him manifest things in the world. So he can manifest, like in this case, in this video game, a huge fist to punch somebody. And like he just makes this big energy fist and he can hit somebody with it. Or again, in this picture, he makes another big energy fist and hits somebody with it. It's a common theme. And when looking for pictures of Green Lantern, this was a very common theme. But that's it, right? So he has this ring that lets him make these big things in the real world that otherwise might not exist. So like in the movie, he makes like a big machine gun and he makes like a huge robot that he rides in and things like that. All right, so now you're going to think why, I'm going to talk about something else for a minute. You're going to think, why did he pick Green Lantern for this week's spiritual gift? What spiritual gift could that possibly be? So the first thing I wanted to give a little bit is I want to talk about spiritual gifts and how spiritual gifts are, they're all equally noble and equally important, right? The spiritual gifts that we have, there's a whole list of spiritual gifts, but they're all vitally important to the body of Christ functioning effectively. If you have a church that has completely none of one gift, it will be very obvious when you visit there, right? You'll even know, just probably within a few visits, that there's maybe something missing. Maybe there's a richness that's not being had. But at the same time, so no matter what gift you have, it's all an important part of the body. And the proof of that, right, is in 1 Corinthians 12:15. It says, if the foot should say, because I am not a hand, I do not belong to the body, it would not for that reason cease to be a part of the body. And if the ear should say, because I am not an eye, I do not belong to the body, it would not for that reason cease to be a part of the body. If the whole body were an eye, where would the sense of hearing be? If the whole body were an ear, where would the sense of smell be? But in fact, God has arranged the parts in the body, every one of them, just as he wanted them to be. So all the gifts are an important part of this one body. And there's a kind of a, if you think about that, like if you read in a little bit to what he says there, that wishing you had somebody else's gift is not productive. Like if I said, well, I know what my gifts are, and there's, if you don't know what your gifts are, there's a test floating around here, there's a stack of pages. Oh, they're over there on the table? And you can fill out, if you want, if you don't know what they are already, you can fill that out and within 10, 15 minutes have a pretty good idea what your gifts are. But you could look at that list of gifts and say, I don't really like this one. I wish I had this more. I wish I was more gifted in these areas. But the thing is, that's not productive. Like the whole body only works when we have all those gifts. So that doesn't mean that, well, if you had like a strong gift of, say, giving, which I'm eliminating one because last week was about giving, right? So if you had a gift of giving, and you said, well, I really wish I had the gift of evangelism. I really, really wish I had that. And you spent all your time thinking about how you don't have that gift, how you're not good at it, you feel uncomfortable when you do it. And instead of giving, that's not productive, right? What's productive is saying, well, this is a gift I've been given by God. I should make use of it. I should put it to effect as much as I possibly can. So, now the other thing is, and this, I think, and this is more just out of an understanding of how humans work, I do think that everybody has at least some part of all the gifts. Maybe it's not very strong, but I do think that everybody can act in a way that expresses all of the gifts. It may be very uncomfortable for you. It may not be something you're super good at, but it's still something, if the need was there, I think everybody can do it. And a good example is myself. Like, I took that test, and I had an almost 0 score in one category, but it wasn't 0, right? It was like 1 or 2 points above the bottom score you can get for something. In evangelism, I'll tell you what it is, because evangelism scares the pants off me. Like, nothing scares me more than evangelism, at all. Like, I like scorpions before I would do evangelism in a comfort level. But I have done it, and even though I'm not very good at it and I'm very uncomfortable at it, sometimes the need is there, and God says, well, you got to do it anyway. But that being said, I do think everybody has some level of all of these gifts. So if today the gift I'm talking about, which you should still be trying to figure out what would be with Green Lantern, and maybe getting obvious, but that being the case, you may not have a very strong gift of the gift I'm talking about today, but I'm telling you, you either know a lot of people who have that gift as a very strong gift, or you yourself also have it to at least a small extent. And so as I talk about it, if it's like, well, that's not what I have, don't just ignore it and say, oh, well, I don't need to worry about thinking about it today because I'm not very good at that. Here's a chance for you to learn better how to work with the other people in the body who have that strongly, and also maybe how when you are called to do that, you can do it better. So, what gift am I talking about today? So today, obviously, who can manifest things in the physical world? Well, people who serve in the physical realm by bringing food, by, what else do we have? Doing carpentry and working maintenance, things like that. We also have mowing the lawn, doing the groundskeeping, and the obvious is making brownies. And so
you may need to practice that one a couple times. That one's obvious to hair.
And so, I figured that was reasonable, right? The people who serve, oftentimes serving in the physical realm, transporting people, bringing food, keeping the grounds up to date, just cleaning up. Those are all things in the physical realm. And I figured, much like Green Lantern, you would manifest things in the physical realm. And so I'm going to read Matthew 25, 42 through 45. And this is probably going to be the most passage we're going to talk about today. In it, Jesus says, "For I was hungry, and you gave me nothing to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me nothing to drink. I was a stranger, and you did not invite me in. I needed clothes, and you did not clothe me. I was sick and in prison, and you did not look after me." They will also answer, "Lord, when did we see you hungry, or thirsty, or a stranger, or needing clothes, or sick in prison, and did not help you?" He will reply, I tell you the truth. Whatever you did not do for one of the least of these, you did not do for me." And that's a strong call by Jesus to serve other people and to serve them in a physical, meeting needs sort of a way. There's nothing ignoble or lesser about that at all. I mean, even something as simple as, oh, I'm thirsty, or I needed clothes. I mean, those things, or just sick and in prison and you did not look after me. Those seem like simple things, visiting the sick, getting somebody something to drink if they're thirsty, cooking food for somebody who's hungry. But they're very, very important, and they're important to the body, and they're important to Jesus. So there's nothing, oftentimes service is sort of treated as kind of the lesser gift, and it really is not that at all. It's a vitally important gift. In fact, I was curious, so Jesus preached about it, but I was a bit curious, how did Jesus actually represent that in his life? And so I figured, well, how many times did Jesus actually give a recorded sermon versus how many times did he actually serve somebody by going and either providing food for them, healing them, exorcising a demon? How many times did he do those things compared to how many sermons do we have written down by him? Because right off the bat, you think, well, Jesus is a perfect example. And I would say it's probably safe to say Jesus exemplified all of these gifts in a perfect way, as a perfect being. And in the Bible, at least, now my numbers are as accurate as I could count them. If you know differently, I'd be happy to hear. But I counted 36 different sermons across the 4 Gospels that Jesus gave. Okay, 36 different sermons. And times of serving, I have 44 times of instances of 27 healings. There were 6 blind men, 11 lepers, 2 paralytics, 3 women of unknown, miscellaneous, 5, like the man with the withered hand, the boy with the seizures, 9 exorcisms of demons, 3 people he raised from the dead, 4 if you count himself, and control of nature and feeding people. He did 5 different times. He turned water into wine. He had the draft of fishes, the feeding of the 5,000, feeding of the 4,000, and then the catch of the 153 fish after his resurrection. So there we have 44 times where he either healed somebody or he served them in an actual just a food capacity. And so that versus just 36 sermons, which I thought was very interesting. To think like, oh, you think of Jesus as the good teacher, and yet we have more examples of him feeding and healing people than we do of teaching. That was very interesting to me. Obviously, then there's a few other miracles that didn't fit into that, like walking on water, walking through walls, that I didn't really think were a service in the same way. So what does a strong service gift look like? So you might say, well, I'm not sure, maybe I have service, maybe I don't, maybe I only sometimes have it, and that's reasonable. But the biggest 3 or 4 things about it are that you like to meet physical needs. And that's an important thing, like the liking to meet physical needs. Like I believe it's possible to maybe that you meet physical needs because you have to, or because you're in a pinch, or because somebody asked you for it and you felt like you should do it. But there's definitely somebody who expresses this in a strong way really enjoys to meet physical needs. That is restorative to them to say, oh, it feels really good. Like when I help somebody, when I bring them food, when I drive them back and forth, I actually feel very much like I'm accomplishing my purpose and what I'm meant to be. And the converse of that is, and all these things are on a continuum, right? That maybe not 100% of the time you feel that way, but maybe on the majority of the percent. On the other hand, I think is, and this is where service, I wanted to do service because I don't naturally have a very strong service gift, is that would you rather be meeting spiritual needs of people? So, and what would that look like? Is that, are you more concerned, hey, is this person prayed for? Is this person right with God? Do they have sin in their lives that they need to remove or take care of? Or is their heart right with God? If those are kinds of things you think about when you think about how to help people, that's kind of more of a spiritual mindset where you're concerned about their relationship with Christ. Or you might say, well, I want to approach somebody from the physical realm where you say, well, are they hungry? Do they need to get somewhere? Do they have enough money to get through the week? Those are kind of more what your first way of being concerned about it in a service gift. And they're both valid. I mean, they're both absolutely needed. But usually a service gift is more in the physical realm. So another attribute of this, if you're trying to think, like, maybe I have this in a strong way, is do you think about how it brings a peace of mind to the people you're helping? So maybe you say, well, I was able to make a casserole for this person, bring it to them, and it really makes me feel good because I know that now they are freed up to do something else. Now this is something they don't have to worry about. That you're taking a burden off of somebody else. If you think about that, that's kind of that sort of that thought about removing the burden from somebody else and being able to do something that you enjoy and freeing them up to maybe serve in another capacity. So like a good example would be, like, I'm terrible at evangelism. It really freaks me out. But in that same sense, if somebody who really loved evangelism came to me and said, oh, Steve, I really need I'm distracted, I don't feel like getting dinner tonight or something like that, do you mind taking me out for dinner? I would say, absolutely, that would be fantastic. I would love to remove you of the burden of thinking about going out for dinner so that you can do what you're good at, because it makes me very uncomfortable. I'm not good at it. Another attribute of that is, if you've noticed that you enjoy working on service projects for the church or working on serving others, and you don't mind if you're alone or you're with other people. that's oftentimes a very common attribute of people who have a service gift, is they don't mind working alone. And that's, not only is that a good attribute, it can be very helpful actually, when there's some tasks you don't need a lot of people, and so it's helpful to have just being able to work on it on your own and not necessarily needing to worry about organizing a lot of people or delegating the work to other people. And finally, the fourth most common attribute of a strong service gift is if you feel like you don't have any gift at all. And that's unfortunate, but that's a very common thing, is that if you feel like you don't have any gift at all, there's nothing you can do that's helpful for the kingdom, that there's nothing, you have nothing to bring to the table, that is a very, very strong indication that you have a strong service gift. Because oftentimes when you come to church, you see more spiritual gifts being applied. You see more worship, leading in prayer, leading in teaching. And you don't necessarily see like, oh, let's come to church and watch the pastor mop the floor. Or let's come to church and see somebody weed the garden. But at the same time, even though you feel like you don't have a very strong gift or a gift at all, that's oftentimes a strong indication of a strong service gift. And a service gift is just as important as any other gift. So, yeah.
Can I throw one more
Absolutely.
thing in there?
Absolutely.
People who are gifted in service don't always want the limelight.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
They
Don't always?
Don't,
Generally don't.
right. But short of the pastor saying, we want to thank Bob for repairing the rafters. A lot of times, a service gift doesn't get public praise or notification, but it's no less important.
Absolutely. It's also the least talked about gift, for sure, and the least praised and the least visible. Yeah. It's a good point. And so I was trying to think, now I didn't build the most comprehensive list in the world, but I was trying to think, like, as I was researching this more, I'm thinking, well, okay, what are services that I've often seen done here at this church? And I realized we do a lot of stuff at this church. So with a very small number of people, here are a list of services you would obviously see on a given week. Is running a PowerPoint soundboard, picking up people to visit, preparing drinks and cleaning up afterwards, building maintenance and repair, including groundskeeping, calling on people who are sick. We have working, delivering, cleaning the food pantry, and unpacking boxes and serving the food. We have leading worship, which I would consider to be a service gift as well. We have the groundskeeping, which I'd said, childcare, which we have people doing right now. Now this one is kind of a bit one, but I would say painting, in that we do have, you see a ton of artwork around here, and that artwork was done as a service, right? It's to meet a physical need of, we want people to see beautiful artwork that when they come to this church. And we want to express God's love to us in a physical realm. I feel like that's a service gift. You see not only painting, but photography, the drama that we do, all of those artistic, physical representations of spiritual concepts. I think singing in the congregation. Sitting out here this morning, you hear a lot of people singing, which is great. And I feel like that is an important gift, because when people hear, when you're sitting and we're worshiping together and singing loudly and proudly, no matter what you sound like, that makes people feel more comfortable. That brings an environment of worship where people can feel comfortable to come and worship together. Another one, giving out candy and Bibles, like at Easter and Halloween that we do. Oftentimes, go out and give out candy, or like what Chuck's doing right now at the fun fair, where he's preparing food to sell to raise money. I would say another one would be, and this is, I wish John Bach were still here because he would tell us all about it, which is Kung Fu. When John Bach, who used to come here and preached a few times, he would talk about how he would use Kung Fu to help the ministry of spreading the word. So he would go and he would do these, breaking board demonstrations and then do a sermon afterwards. And so there was a chance where he could use something very physical in the physical realm, like breaking boards and high kicking, and he would use that to spread the gospel. And then lastly, really, so those are just the ones I've seen. Okay, the Kung Fu I haven't seen in the last week, but pretty much the rest of those you see on a week-to-week basis are all gifts that happen around here, and that gifts places where we need help as well, right? Maybe you're not doing anything right now. Those are a whole variety of things that absolutely need to be done to keep a ministry running and to make a place where people can come and worship. And really, so those also should probably indicate, the variety of those things should indicate that you can do anything for God's kingdom. If you have a gift in something, even if it's like I said, painting, that's or drama, that seems like a kind of a gift that's just kind of, well, okay, great. But at the same time, that can be a strong, strong gift that can be used for the kingdom. And if you have a gift that maybe you say, well, I don't quite know how it fits in, I guarantee you there's a place where it fits in. You start looking around for it. All right, so that's a list. That's kind of to give you an indication of what service looks like in people as a gift. Now, I thought, well, there's one other thing. If I was good at service, which unfortunately I'm not, but I know a lot of people who are. And one of the things I was thinking about is like, well, how, if I had a strong gift of service, or in my case I had a low gift of service, how would I be a better server? Like, how can I be better at that gift? Because maybe I already know, but now I want to know, like, how can I take it to the next level? What are some things to watch out for that I could maybe concrete take to work on? So, oftentimes, I'm going to go the sandwich method here, right? I'm going to tell you, here are some great things about people with a strong service gift. Here are some areas where oftentimes they struggle, and here are some suggestions. So we'll start with the great things. The great things are, oftentimes, people with a strong service gift are very available. They oftentimes are very much available all the time. Oh, you need me to be there at 9:30? I'm there. You need me to be there at 2 in the morning to pick up from the airport? I'm there. Oh, during church to go serve food? No problem, I'm there. Strong availability is oftentimes something that is a really good strength in somebody with a good service gift. Another one is a strong desire for order. Be able to keep things organized, being able to know where things go, how to put them in a place where they're best used and best available for people and not wasted. Because that's another thing. You put things in the wrong way in the food pantry, they're going to get wasted. Food's going to spoil, and they're not going to be useful. And finally, and I think this is the most important thing really, is this: people who have a strong service gift oftentimes have a very practical humility. And I mean, I think humility is one of the most important attributes of a Christian, because it's recognizing your true place in relation to God and others. And a person with a strong service gift oftentimes finds that very easy. He's like, oh, it's easy for me to humble myself to do something that seems menial. Maybe just, cleaning the floors. Seems menial. Will we get along without clean floors? Yes, but it's actually very important. If somebody comes in here and there's trash all over the floor, it's going to look terrible. It's going to be dangerous. People can slip. But also, too, it's going to take away from people's ability to worship. And so that sort of, there's no job too menial. That's a very important mindset. That shows a strong humility and a strong understanding that nothing is too low when it comes to serving Christ's kingdom. That's a very, very important aspect. Some weaknesses, though, right? So here's some ways where sometimes it gets a little bit harder. Maybe someone with a strong service gift might struggle. Is that it might be too easy to let physical things become too important. So you get the one story in the Bible of, hey, Jesus says, come spend time with me. Don't just spend all your time in the kitchen. Don't just spend all your time cooking. Come spend time with me. I'm what's important here, is what Christ was saying. And letting things become too important, sometimes it's where you say, well, I can't go to Bible study because I'm too busy getting food ready for people. Or I don't have time for my own personal study and prayer because there's just too much to do, too many people to serve. And so that sort of neglecting spiritual gifts or spiritual things sometimes can happen if you're too focused on physical things. Another one, and this one is very common here especially, is that it's easy to get overcommitted. To say yes to everything. Oh yes, I can be there to pick them up. Oh yes, I can clean the church again. Oh yes, I can do PowerPoint again this week. And just having to feel this obligation to always say yes to the place where you feel stressed out and worn out. Another one is, this one I think is a little less common, but is sometimes a person with a strong service gift will feel like if they're given a task to get done in a certain amount of time, that's not enough time. So it's frustrating to say, like, well, we're just gonna do this, and you only have a half an hour to prepare. And it's like, well, that's not enough time. I can't get that done. And that's a little less common, but that can happen. And then lastly, really, is that it's very easy to get bitter if you feel unappreciated. to say, well, I've been serving so hard, I do all these things, I give up all my time, and yet nobody says anything. Nobody says thank you for that. Nobody knows and nobody watches out. And then you start to get bitter and jealous about all these other gifts. That's a very common thing for service. And it's obvious why. Because service is a giving of your time, your money, your energy. And if you feel like you're giving that thing and nobody notices or cares, it can be very difficult. It can feel very isolating. And then lastly, kind of a add-on to that, which is that you might often feel that the other people you know who don't have strong service gifts are really lazy. Like, why don't they take care of this place like I do, right? It's easy to feel like everyone else around you is really lazy when you're the hardest working person in the group. And that is a sign of, well, you have a very strong service gift. You have a lot of energy from that. That's what restores you. That may not be true for other people. It may be that other people who do the service, who are doing it with you, maybe it actually, they really don't enjoy it. It does not restore them, but they're doing it because they see a need and they want to meet it. And so it's easy to kind of feel like everyone else around you is just being lazy when, perhaps it's just a difference in gifts. So those are some things where it can be difficult. And so I got 3 main suggestions to try to say. If you feel like any of those things are like, oh, that is so me, I have 3 big suggestions for things you could try to use to improve or ways you could try to think about these things. And I say the first thing is if you feel overworked and you feel overburdened, like there's just too much to happen and you can't take care of yourself, you can't take care of the people that are important to you, and you're feeling stressed out and overworked, is to prayerfully practice saying no to things. So feeling confident to say, I know there's this need, but God will meet it some other way. And sometimes I can't meet every need. We are very much limited in time and money, and there is just so much only that one person can do. And it's absolutely okay to say no. It's totally fine. And it can be probably, I would say, in researching this, for a service person, saying no could be probably one of the hardest things you ever learn. Because you want to say yes to everyone. You want to meet every single need you possibly can. And so sometimes learning to say no sometimes can be a very hard thing. But what you're doing is you're learning to trust God instead of yourself. Right? Because if somebody says, oh, well, like there's this need I have, can somebody pick somebody else up? And you're like, I really can't. I'm at the end of my rope. There's no way I can do that. What do you do when you say no? You're trusting that God will meet that need. Right? You're saying, it's not all about me. It's not about me chasing down every single fire in the world. God will meet that need. And perhaps it's not for me to do. And that's why I say prayerfully practice this. That might be a good chance to just take a moment to pray about it, to think, is this really something that God wants me to do? Is he going to give me the energy and the resources to get it done? Is that why I'm seeing this need? Or am I seeing this need just because I happen to see the need and that's it? And here's a chance where he wants me to practice saying no. I think that is very, very reasonable. And I'm sure it's very hard. I say no all the time, so it's not hard for me. But I'm sure it is very, very hard. And that's something that you would need to practice, and it would be very, but you have to realize that it is God you're trusting in. It is God who will meet that need, and not you. You don't have to meet that need. So the second one was, I would say, balancing out meeting physical needs with spiritual ones. Perhaps all you can see are physical needs. Perhaps all you can think about are people hungry, people not getting enough food, the floors need to be swept, the lawn's too long. If those are all things you can see, perhaps try introducing praying for people more. So say, like, when I see a need for somebody, if I spend 5 minutes meeting that need, maybe I also spend 5 minutes praying for their need, praying for their heart, praying for their relationship with Christ. And start trying to look at how can you meet someone's spiritual need as well as their physical need. And that would be difficult, right? Obviously, if you're normally used to just like, well, I got them the food, I'm done. Instead of thinking the longer views, how is this affecting their relationship with Christ? How can this bless them? I would say another one would be to feel confident to spend time studying the Word, looking for ways these other gifts implement. Maybe, for example, you meet someone's need, you take some food to them, and then you spend some time praying for them. And maybe also you could spend some time just reading a little bit about how does serving affect people? Read stories of ways that Jesus served people. Try to balance out the physical needs with the spiritual need as well. And then lastly, and this is something in college that we talked about, I was in a Christian fraternity, and we talked about this all the time, which is that when you do anything, no matter what it is, you do it cheerfully and you do it for God. And that's why we should be doing anything we do. If I'm going to class, I'm doing it, and I should be doing it cheerfully, and I should be doing it for God's glory. If I'm going to work, I should be doing it cheerfully for God's glory. Thankful for the gifts that He's given me. So in Matthew 6, 1 through 40, not 1 through 46, 6, 1 through 6, it says, "Watch out. Don't do your good deeds publicly to be admired by others, for you will lose the reward from your Father in heaven. When you give to someone in need, don't do as the hypocrites do, blowing trumpets in the synagogues and the streets to call attention to their acts of charity. I tell you the truth, they have received all the reward they will ever get. But when you give to someone in need, don't let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. Give your gifts in private, and your Father, who sees everything, will reward you." And then finally, my fraternity's house verse, which was Colossians 3:23. "Work willingly at whatever you do, as though you were working for the Lord rather than for people." So if you feel like that, like you're just getting weary, like no one's ever thanked me for this, all I do is just work and work and work, and it's for nothing. It is not for nothing. You are doing it for God and God's kingdom, and He will reward you. Maybe you don't see the reward now. Maybe it comes in a whole later life. But He will reward you for that. So I'm going to read that one more time. Colossians 3:23. "Work willingly at whatever you do, as though you were working for the Lord rather than for people." Let's pray. God, I thank you so much that you've given us these gifts. You've given us all these ways we can serve you. And that even though sometimes we have to practice and we have to learn new things, and sometimes it can be uncomfortable, that we have just this rich diversity that we can bring to the table. Thank you that you give us physical and spiritual ways we can serve you and serve your kingdom. And thank you that we're all brothers and sisters in this together. I pray for all of us here who have a strong service gift, that we realize that we are doing this for you and for your glory only. I pray that this week, that those of us that are feeling weary and tired and overworked find restoration, find freedom, and that they have this gift, but maybe not every gift has to be something that every opportunity doesn't have to be something that they do. That they can feel confident saying no and trusting in you to meet those needs. Thank you so much that you've just done so much for us, and you've rescued us out of our own sin and death. Thank you for the gifts you've given us. Amen.
Amen.